Hello, my name is Bailey Birtchet. I'm a senior graphic design major and marketing minor at Meredith College, and I will be presenting my honors thesis, Contextualizing Graphic Design, a Material Culture Approach to Ethical Design and Consumption in the USA. Consumption, defined as the purchase and use of goods and services, has evolved from the acquisition of necessities to become a way of expressing both social capital and a material form of the idea of the self. Where individuals used to consume to satisfy needs, now they consume to satisfy wants. Consumption of wants, even wants characterized as needs, shifts the meaning of consumable goods. From a consumerist perspective, consumable goods are meaning-giving commodities. The meanings attached to consumable goods transfers to the person purchasing and consuming that object. We are what we buy. Consumption has shifted from consuming objects necessary for physical survival to consuming objects necessary for psychological survival, specifically the perpetuation of one's idea of one's own self. Where consumption of material goods used to serve as a display of capital and wealth, now the accumulation and consumption of goods is a display or performance of self. Commodities are valued less for their cost, though cost is still important, but more for the work they do on the consumer's identity. Contemporary consumer society is critiqued from a variety of perspectives. First, the environmental critique argues that consumerism depletes the environment of natural resources and creates non-biodegradable waste. Second, the labor used to produce these goods is exploitative. The working conditions are dangerous and unhealthy, the wages are not sustainable, and there is no opportunity for advancement or real skill development. These critiques have failed to slow consumerist behaviors from infiltrating every aspect of individual and social life in the U.S., mostly because of the way that consumerist society enables capitalism. One reason capitalism has flourished in America is because advertising has created an association between American ideals and values and capitalism. Capitalism is uniquely American, and America would not be what it is without capitalism. Consumers' production and consumption does not happen without advertising creating wants and artificial needs in consumers. There is a large body of literature analyzing and critiquing the role of advertising in generating needs and the environmental and social costs incurred when this happens. An under-theorized criticism of contemporary consumer society is the role of graphic design in constructing, defining, and perpetuating consumerist culture. Generally, graphic design is recognized for guiding the consumption of products and services through messages conveyed by visually arresting imagery. However, design is more than just how visuals engage the emotions of consumers. Design is how aesthetic properties influence the meaning of an object and how those properties shape the consumer's sense of self and identity. When studied in the context of theories of practice and affect, graphic design is not a small part of the larger story about advertising, consumerism, and capitalist culture. The aesthetic principles of design are foundational to advertising. Any critique of consumerist culture that does not address how design influences consumer behavior is incomplete. The intertwining of graphic design with American attitudes towards culture and consumption is an underexplored and under-theorized part of the consumerist critique of how, what, and why Americans consume. American graphic design practice is conflated with consumerism because the United States is so thoroughly capitalist. The emphasis on consumption as a civic duty transforms the individual into a consumer citizen. In America, values such as freedom, individualism, liberty, and self-determination are foundational for understanding what America is and what it means to be American. Graphic design, as a cultural practice, animates these principles by embedding them in the design that is one part of the larger advertising and brand expression. Therefore, graphic design is significant to society because it is a culturally specific practice that is not only informed by societal moral concerns and priorities of consumption, but also perpetuates them by constructing the visual ecosystem that reinforces the habitus and identity of the American consumer. The materialization of American values in the elements of design and advertising results in the consumer taking on the ideas and values embedded in the advertising. First, making them what they consume, and second, making them more thoroughly American by consuming. Using theories of practice, habitus, material culture, and consumer behavior, my thesis explores the impact graphic design has on the development of consumer culture in the U.S. in addition to its potential for encouraging social reform. Every person who consumes commodities is a part of a society of consumers that encourages behaviors and patterns of consumption that assigns meaning and value to what is consumed. Because everyone has to consume to live, and more than this, everyone consumes in order to be who they are, consumption is no longer a choice. There are only options of what to consume. Were one not to consume, or consume the wrong way, one risks being ostracized from the community. Therefore, to consume means to invest in one's own social membership. Advertisers and designers make consumption mandatory by relying on and exploiting the fear of not belonging, and more than that, the fear of not being a self. You are what you buy implies its opposite. You are nothing if you buy nothing. The sum total of the products consumed adds up to a person. Identity is the proof of purchase, visible markers of belonging, and our social citizenship into the society of consumers. The rise of neoliberalism intensifies the link between consumption and identity. In liberal societies, the collective identity created by government or civic clubs and organizations provided an avenue for identity separate from consumption. Identity through consumption has filled the void created by the decline of civic clubs and the shrinking of the government. In neoliberalism, market logic shapes and dominates exchange, changing services into goods that can be bought and sold. Neoliberal consumerism gives value to those who can consume socially valuable goods, services, and ideals. The meaning of the smartphone extends beyond its use. Manufacturer, brand, operating system, and service provider all connote different things and attach themselves to the individual. The extension of market logic into all areas of society, tied to the idea that to consume is to be a good citizen, means the ability to consume, where one consumes and what one consumes, is moralized. The freedom that the market grants by promising access to any and all who want it casts those who do not and cannot afford goods in the market in a negative light. Where before commodities were fetishized and had abstract ideas attached to them, neoliberalism sees abstractions like health and wellness become commodified and sold to those who can't afford it. According to neoliberal ideology, an individual is limited only by the amount of material goods they can accumulate, and, to another degree, the social capital and influence the objects they accumulate carry. Individuals can only have what they can afford to buy. This includes buying their way into a higher social class. Depending on one's social class, one will have different degrees of worth. Those in the 1% holding the most esteem for their social and physical capital, while those who cannot afford to accumulate objects at a constant rate, their worth is located in their labor that those with administrative power profit from, which further increases the wage and class gap. It has shifted the blame from an ineffective economic system to the individual by spouting hardline beliefs that those who are benefiting from a free market economy are doing so deservedly because of their hard work, while those who are experiencing poverty are as a consequence because of their poor work ethic. It has effectively made society more about individual efforts to succeed rather than what is best for the common good. This idea has seeped into almost every aspect of society, and we see it heavily in our consumer habits. If an individual is able to buy commodities without financial stress or fear, then they are appraised as more worthy of respect, attention, and are thought to deserve the good things that happen to them, even though the good things that happen to them are directly correlated to their wealth. At the opposite end of the socioeconomic spectrum, individuals are given less respect and are thought to deserve the bad things that happen to them, even though the bad things that happen to them are directly correlated to their inability to purchase protection and security in the market. For this reason, individuals come to define their worth according to their financial ability to consume. Consumerism hinges on the idea that abstract ideals and values are attached to material goods such that buying the product transfers those values and ideals onto the consumer. The individual becomes themselves in the act of consumption so that their sense of self is the proof of what they have purchased. A receipt is an artifact, a memento of purchase for consumers. It is simultaneously a source of pride and shame. Pride in that they fulfilled their duty as consumers, but shame about how much they consume. The shame in a receipt comes from how they accumulate, and how this accumulation invades the spaces we live in, preventing us from forgetting just how much we spend on a regular basis. However, the evidence of our excessive consumption does nothing to slow our consumptive habits. The form a receipt takes devalues its importance in two ways. First, paper is a disposable material, so a single strip of paper does not have permanence compared to other material objects. Second, a receipt is so small in the presence of goods that it goes unnoticed. These qualities are significant because it allows us as consumers to reduce the receipt to a disposable object. In that way, it is repetition of the very object it represents. Like the commodity, the receipt points beyond itself to another meaning, and like the object it points to, it is empty of meaning in and of itself, and is therefore disposable. Our perception of receipts enables us to treat our excessive consumption habits as if they were inconsequential by equating the cost we incurred with the disposable nature of receipts, thus allowing us to erase the record of our consumption by thoughtlessly throwing the receipt away. The act of discarding a receipt is a way to disassociate from the act of purchase. This disassociation enables us to continue to purchase more goods as a means to push down feelings of guilt. However, if one were to assign more meaning to the receipt, it would disrupt individual habits of consumption by casting doubt on their reasons for purchase, which was my motivation behind the creation of this receipt. I wanted to recenter the receipt as proof of what was purchased to show what we are attempting to accomplish by discarding our receipts. If the receipt is an abstract record of the purchase, I wanted to create a receipt that reflected what it is we, as consumers, are actually buying. No longer an object that can be easily discarded, an act that once freed consumers of accountability, the scale of this receipt confronts the viewer with the reality of their excessive consumption habits. This confrontation forces the viewer to reconcile their habits of consumption with their individual, civic, and global identity to reflect on what they are accumulating as the receipts pile up. In addition to changing the scale of the receipt, I changed the language used on the receipt to illustrate the hypocrisy inherent in consumption. The rewards program section addresses the idea that we are being rewarded, or incentivized, to shop at the same store as just another strategy to create another loyal consumer. By signing up for a rewards program, we are allowing ourselves to be commodified as a subject for that company that will aid their research in consumer behavior that they will then use for advertising to secure even more loyal consumers. The ironic call to action to recycle, located at the bottom of the receipt, is a testament to the extent of our concern for the environment. Individuals do not want to harm the environment, but they are also unwilling to compromise and reduce their consumption habits. Rather than recycling for the betterment of the environment, recycling in the U.S. is a way to justify excessive consumptive habits. It is merely a band-aid for the larger effects consumer behaviors have on the environment. While recycling the receipt produces some good, these effects are inconsequential when compared to the ecological benefits of just not shopping. By subverting the language used by marketers to encourage future consumption, I was able to free the artifact of its commercial shackles through graphic design and elevate the receipt to be a call for social reform. As an art that shapes behavior, graphic design is responsible for the advancement of contemporary U.S. consumer culture. Because graphic design promotes goods that are mass-produced in ways harmful to the social and natural environment, it is consequently a part of the many ways that the U.S. contributes to global warming. Theoretically, if graphic design can rouse environmentally harmful consumer behaviors, like overconsumption of natural resources, then the opposite should be true as well. Graphic design should be able to serve more ethical ends by promoting more sustainable behaviors, even from its position as a proponent of consumerism and as a practice.